Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. I want to also welcome, we have a plethora, a myriad amount of new first-time attenders, long-time listeners here with us today. We have, first of all, Michael and Chana Levi, Bruchim Habayim again, who brought us the Mechaber Sfarim, Rabbi Sharabani. Rani, is it? Roni Sharabani. Unbelievable. His Sfarim Me'afar Kumi have brought me tremendous joy. The Olam should really should go find them because they will bring you also tremendous hana'ah. It's a beautiful combination of a Sephardi and a yeshivish outlook and appreciation of Torah. It's very, very special, Baruch Hashem. We've got with us the Sakas for the weekend. Congratulations, Sammy, on your 60th birthday, and with the kids and with the in-laws, Elliot Antivy, long-time Safran member. Also, I just want to share with you something about Elliot Antivy. Unbelievable. I mentioned once that there was a guy who gives a little Dvar Torah, who gives a 15-minute piece on Mishnayot. And he said, I want to do that every day. And I didn't hear from him. Years later, he comes and he says, I'm making a siyum on Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Unbelievable. One line, one idea of a guy, listens, responds to it. All of a sudden, he finishes Shas Mishnayot. So whoever's going to want to do it, there's an invitation to do so as well. Of course, we have our first crossover hit in David. David's first crossover hit from Monday night, making it into the Breakfast in the Class crew. Yishtabach Shemo. So we have a lot of first timers. We have a very distant attender, but he's been here many, many times. Bruchim Habayim, Chazak Baruch leMishparat Atiyeh. Nachon? Unbelievable. Very, very special. You should always only travel here, Be'ezat Hashem, for good things. And of course, most importantly, more important than all of you, sorry, Selicha, is the fact that in that corner is my son Yitzchak Farhi and his good friend Benny Mizrahi. Be'ezat Hashem, future leaders in this Bet Knesset and in Am Yisrael, and one of our youngest ever attenders of Breakfast in the Class. What's your name? Sammy Saki Ishtabach Shemo. Unbelievable. Ashrecha. Unbelievable. You have big shoes to fill, young man. All right? God bless. Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, let's begin. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated in loving memory of Rachel Silvera, Lilu Nishmat Rachel Bat Bolisa, sponsored by Carol and Maurice Silvera. The week of Breakfast in the Class is dedicated to the Refuah Shlema of Feivel Baruch Ben Devorah, Fred Gross, sponsored by Rebecca and Stephen Bedesha family. Shemi Refuah Shlema. The learning for this week is dedicated by the Daniel S. Loeb Torah Center Diamond donor Gadi Ben Hamul, in loving memory of his parents Aaron Ben Frecha and Chana Bat Rivka Zichronam Livracha. Please only answer Amen if you're listening to this live. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Shehakol Niyah Baruch. So my friends, I want to share with you an idea, something that was very powerful when I first recognized this idea, this chidush. Last week, we read, and that was what the Shabbat class was all about. The Shabbat class was all about the idea of the three gifts, the three wonderful things that Sarah Imenu had at her tent. And how Yitzchak was mourning, not per se for his mother, but the way we explained it yesterday in the class was that he was mourning the fact that there would never be another Sarah Imenu. He was mourning the fact that there would never be a mother to raise his children the way his mother had raised him. That's what he was mourning. How would he communicate those elevated signs above his mother's tent, which we explained in the class, were parallels to the three mitzvot that a woman can fulfill, not only in the dogmatic and in the religious practice itself of chala, nida, and hadlakat haner, but also in the idea behind what is chala, what is hadlakat haner, and what is hilchot nida, and how those ideas are relevant and just as relevant to men as they are to women. So we talked about that yesterday, and Yitzchak was so sad about that until Rivka comes and the signs are there. Now is Vayinachem, now he was comforted after the loss of his mother, because Yitzchak was too tough a character to believe that he was someone that all this time after, he's still in mourning. The guy who could lie down on the altar and say tie me tight is not a guy who's crying, who's so soft that he's still upset about losing his mother. He was willing to die himself. So the answer we explained yesterday was that he thought that that was dead to the world. And when he saw that Rivka had those midot, he knew that now his kids could also have that as well, and that would be baked into Am Yisrael. So the last time we read about Yitzchak and Rivka was at that point. We now read about Yitzchak and Rivka. What do we read? They can't have children. How long have they been married at this point? How long? 20 years. I mean, if someone made a highlight reel of your life and skipped 20 years of your life, I think you're probably doing something wrong, no? You had nothing to talk about Yitzchak and Rivka for 20 years? The moment she came, and then the moment that their prayers got through? Tell me about how they were sitting at the dinner table and they were talking about it and they made a cheshbon hanefesh. I mean, tell us about the time Rivka went to the grocery store and the guy gave her too much change back, and Rivka Imenu said, you gave me too much change. There's nothing to learn from Yitzchak and Rivka's life for 20 years. It's impossible, right? But in fact, that's what it's like. Right? We go from story to story. Immediately after this story happens, Yitzchak and Rivka are almost written out of the story. What else do we know about Yitzchak and Rivka's life? Almost nothing. It's true, they still feature in the story of Yaakov and Esav. But isn't that fascinating? They're the least mentioned people in Torah. My rabbi said, you know who gets more airtime than Yitzchak? Lavan. More airtime, more talk time. Esav. One answer, Eliezer, much more. One answer, my rabbi expressed, Rabbi Berkowitz Shalita. One answer was that the truth is, Yitzchak has a lot to teach. But the only people that can learn from Yitzchak are perfect people. Yitzchak's level was so high, it wasn't relevant. So imagine you're giving basketball camp to a bunch of Jewish kids in Deal. Of course I'm talking about a Jewish camp. Obviously, no one would send their children to a non-Jewish camp. Who would be crazy enough to do that after you spent all that money to make sure that they have Jewish values and they hang out with Jewish kids? I mean, you'd have to be crazy to send your kids to a non-Jewish camp, right? Obviously. Okay. Well, says the pasuk, right? Listen to this. I just give him. I just deliver him. And then I leave. My friends, it's like Amazon. You drop it at the door. My friends, let's understand this. You take your kids to a camp. Your kids are Jewish kids. They're basketball kids. All of a sudden the coach comes in and the coach says, listen, when you're doing a 360 dunk, like remember who originated the 360 dunk? Jordan? No. 360 dunk. Vince Carter is wrong. He did it. No. Hakeem Olajuwon. It might have been Dominique Wilkins, by the way. I might actually take that back. It might have been Dominique Wilkins. He was a Hawks, right? Might have been him. 360 dunk. Imagine you're telling a bunch of Jewish kids, listen, Moshe, when you go up for the 360 dunk, shoot dunk, he's 5'1", and he's no Muggsy Bogues, this guy. All right? You don't have to teach a guy about a 360 dunk if he's never getting close to the rim. So what do? You talk to that guy about fundamentals, how you dribble, how you shoot over a guy who's much taller than you, if he's a Jewish basketball player. Right? Understand? Yitzchak Avinu, he was Ola Temimah. Yeah. He's never left Israel, because he was like a korban. So to put Yitzchak in the Torah was setting the standards too high. That's how my rabbi explained this concept. There's a lot to understand in that as well. And I think as well, there's a tremendous lesson that's relevant to all of us. That when a person is trying to learn from a rabbi, if you're barely holding anywhere and your rabbi is Rav Shach, you might not. That's why the Torah says, El HaShoftim, you will go to the Shofet, Asher Bayamim Hahem. That's in that day. En Licha Ela HaShofet, Asher Biyamecha. All you have is the rabbi, is the judge in your day. And that judge is not on the level of the judges that came before him in previous generations. And the reason is because if he was, the people would not relate to him, and he would not relate to the people. So maybe one idea in not bringing Yitzchak is in choosing a rabbi that understands you where you're at and is going to challenge you where you're at. Until, by the way, you outgrow that. And then you lift your level higher and you try and do more. If you're still in breakfast in the class only, in 20 or 30 years from now, I have failed you miserably. How many times have I asked in this class to people not only to sit back and be entertained and have someone deliver an idea to you, but to challenge yourself to open the books, the Sfarim, and to learn yourself, and to go to Gemara classes, and to try. Yeah, we have to evolve. That's one idea. But I do feel that there's a deeper and more powerful concept I want to touch on now. Actually, there is a highlight reel, both in the story of Yitzchak and Rivka, and in every single person. In your marriage, there are moments in your marriage which are defining moments. Moments that change your path and your trajectory forever. And the Torah is communicating that Yitzchak and Rivka, of course they had the most elevated, the most beautiful marriage ever. They built a beautiful home, they did beautiful things. But the Torah, in the limited amount of space that it has, needs to cherry pick the lessons that would be relevant forever. Now, every nivu'ah that God gave to a Navi is the most mind-blowing thing we could ever imagine, that God could communicate with a human being. But the Gemara says that the only nivu'ah that was recorded was a nivu'ah that was lidorot, that it was a relevant message for all generations. As the generations have declined, where we feel further and further from these lessons, maybe the lessons of Yitzchak and Rivka were relevant, but they wouldn't be relevant for all the dorot, and therefore they were cut. But the highlight reel, unbelievable. Let me explain and let me express. I think when we read about Yitzchak Avinu waiting to see those signs, we hearken back to a fascinating idea that was first shared, I believe, by the Kutzker. It definitely was not first shared by Dominique Wilkins. The Kutzker said as follows: Eliezer comes to the well. What does he see? What's the first thing Eliezer sees? He sees Rivka go to the well, and miraculously, the water of the well rises to her being able to draw the well. It's the Kutzker, game over. You see a Sadiq that has miracles happening, that's the one. He still carries through his OG plan, which is, I'm going to go, I'm going to say this. If she says, I'm going to give to you and to the camels, then that's the one. Why does he need the whole game and charade if he already saw that this woman is a Sadiq, she had the miracle? That's it, she's the one. Answers the Kutzker. Just because someone's a tzaddik doesn't mean that they're perfect and that they're right for you. A lot of times, people will decide to get married because the guy, wow, you don't know what a tzaddik this guy is. He's wow, unbelievable midot. He's a tzaddik. Does that mean he's your tzaddik? No. Sometimes we give up on things that we know that we need because we're dazzled and we're impressed by something else that is undoubtedly beautiful. And I'm sure that that would also enhance your marriage. But that's not what you need. Now this concept, the first lesson that we're learning from Yitzchak and Rivka's interaction is, he brings her into the tent of Sarah Imo. And as Rashi says, Veharehi Sarah Imo. She is what Sarah was. Vayehaveha, and he loves her. Yitzchak waited to love her. Not after a miracle. Not after she's a tzaddiket. Not after she covers herself and she shows that she's modest. He's got all the signs of an amazing girl. But does that mean that she's my amazing girl? Now I know I'm going to get blasted after this class. Rabbi, the young men and women are already picky enough. Don't make them more picky. We already have a shidduch crisis. Don't make it a shidduch crisis plus one. And I agree. It's important not to be picky on things that don't matter. It is important to remain picky on things that do matter. Yitzchak knew that these things were must-haves. You cannot give up on must-haves. Only after V'harei Sarah V'yehaveha. By the way, you don't find that word by all the marriages in the Torah. Sometimes you find, and he brought her to this tent, you find different words. Vayeda, and he knew her. You don't always find Vayyehaveh, that he loved her. My friends, that was one of the lessons, the first lesson of Yitzchak and Rivka. The second lesson is a lesson where we find Yitzchak praying Le'nochach ishto. So we cut to a scene. We cut to a scene. What's the new scene? The new scene is Yitzchak praying opposite his wife. And what are they praying for? Ki akarahi, because she can't have children. This idea, I think, is trying to tell us something so beautiful. That when Yitzchak and Rivka were married to each other for the right reasons, you know what elevated their marriage? Not necessarily doing all the right things in marriage. A person might do 1,000,001 of the right things, but those are not noteworthy enough to be able to communicate to me as to what the element of marriage is. And I'm going to express this, please listen very carefully, because you're very likely to get the wrong idea if you're half listening to this. It's not that the day-to-day things don't matter. In fact, the day-to-day things matter more than the big things. But there are two different kinds of big things that happen in a marriage. One kind of big thing is a show of romance, a show of appreciation. That's something that doesn't matter so much. You took someone on a big vacation. You splashed out and you bought them something very nice. You showed a tremendous amount of love and dedication in a one-time fashion. That's nothing. That will fade from memory. That will disappear. You're going to go right back to it. I went to the chiropractor the other day. The guy said, I need to see you. I said, when? He said, like tomorrow. I said, you need to see me tomorrow? Tomorrow, the next day? Usually you go to a doctor, guy wants to see you 6 months or a year. The chiropractor, he said, explain to me like this, Dr. Fenster. He explained to me like this. He said, what we're trying to do here is stretch something, is realign something, okay? You've walked a certain way, shifted your way a certain way, so it's in a different position. I could stretch it. It'll feel great for a day, but it's gonna go right back. The only way I could fix it is if I see you repeatedly after a 1 or 2 day session. Do what it doesn't need to take a long time. Push that in the right way, stretch it, keep it stretched, and then after enough of these times, then something will change. There are times when a person could do something day after day after day after day after day after day, and it's not working. And what's the reason why it's not working? Because you need a realignment. That's what Yitzchak Lenochach Ishto is doing. That's what Yitzchak demanding a certain level is doing. It's demanding a certain shift, a certain change. Now I have to ask you this question. And this question is not only about marriage. It's a question about the rhythm of life. Because I heard Joey out of the back of my ear asking, is that really the best thing? Let them go out. Let them figure it out. I didn't see what you said, I didn't hear what you said. But was it the basic gist? Yeah. No, what were you saying?
He had, considering how great he was, that he has his son.
Okay, so we'll deal with that question in this week's parasha. Okay, I thought you were commenting a great comment. What do you mean, Rabbi? Let them go. Let them try. If they go and they try before you've worked out at least the red flags, then what happens oftentimes is that they go out, they like each other, and they ignore the red flags. Right? Nothing more than red flags. More than red flags, you don't need to. In fact, it might even be damaging too. But the red flags, get them off the table first. This is not only true about dating. When a person decides that they're going to move to a new neighborhood, that analysis process, understanding what is your non-negotiables, that even if everything else is perfect, even if everything else is overcompensating, these things cannot be paid for, no matter what the currency. When I first applied for this job, I came one Shabbat. They were like, we would like to offer you the job, maybe you consider it. Saturday night, Shtabach Shemo. I said, I need to look into it. I come back again. I came back a second time. I said, I'm going to come now with my whole family, all my children. They're going to fly now, me and all my children. So at the time, the president said to me, he said, maybe come a few more times, see if you like, then come with, bring your kids and the whole family. I said, I don't think you understand. If my kids can't find schools that work for them, there isn't going to be a next time. The number one priority in that decision was not what I want or what I like or what's going to be good for me. The very first responsibility I have to have is to my children. And if you can't find a place that will work for your kids, then there's no conversation. It doesn't make a difference how good the position is, how much good I'll be able to do, anything. None of that would matter. It reminds me of one of my favorite ideas that was said to me by Diane Beanstalk, who I understand is now going to be stepping down from St. John's Wood Synagogue, and they're looking for a replacement. Good luck, they're never going to be able to replace someone like him, but at least they're going to try and find someone to sit in his seat. Diane Beanstalk said the most beautiful idea. He said in Parashat Shemot, we find that Moshe Rabbeinu was coming back to save the Jewish people from slavery. People are dying, people are being killed, people are being beaten every day of the week. Anyway, what happens? He has two kids, Gershon and Eliezer, right? This is, he's coming back to the land of Egypt. As he's coming back, he checks into a hotel, a snake attacks him, it's going to kill him. Why does a snake attack him? Snake attacks him because he's not yet done Brit Milah on his son. The reason why he didn't do Brit Milah is because he was traveling, he was dangerous. Okay, but now that you got to where you're getting to, you should have first done the Brit Milah and then checked in, then taken care of everything else. You had to delay it, you had a good reason, fine. But now that you're here, that should have been your first priority. Until Tzipporah comes, she does the Brit Milah on her son before the snake could kill Moshe Rabbeinu. She saves her husband's life. Okay? Ask Diane Beanstalk. Amazing question. He says, I don't understand. God, you have all the Jewish people dying. You have the leader. They're all suffering. So fine, Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake. But you're going to deny the Jewish people their leader because of this little mistake that Moshe Rabbeinu made? All these people are going to gotta die until you find somebody else? How long is that going to take? Answered Diane Beanstalk an amazing answer. He said, if Moshe, or at least Moshe and his team, i.e. Tzipporah, we know a husband and wife are like one body, like one soul. If Moshe could tend to the needs of the people, and that came at the cost of not doing what he needed to do for his own son, then God didn't cost the Jewish people a leader. He was never the leader of the Jewish people. Because it can't be that the leader would lead at the expense of his own children. He's obviously not the guy. So the Jewish people would not have lost their leader. He never would have been the leader. Because he didn't tend to his own children first. My friends, This is what I mean when I talk about non-negotiables. What is your non-negotiable at work? At what point do you look at the environment at work and say, this is not for me? Now it's true, if I leave, I'll make less money. But the way that people speak over here, the way that they think, the way that they act, the things that they make me do. There was a generation of people that gave up their jobs because of Shabbat. And they struggled with that. Right? During the Great Depression, people were getting laid off every week. And it's not just they couldn't pay tuition or send their kids to camp. They didn't have food. They were struggling, suffering. But for them, that was a red line. At work, there are red lines. In Shidduchim, there are red lines. Where your kid is at school, red lines. Now, if something happens at the school that you don't like, so what do? You make sure that they correct it. If the school tells you, we're not correcting it, so you have to decide if you're going to live with it. Where are your red lines? These are the concepts, I believe, that the Torah is communicating to us when it comes to the Avot. There's many lessons from every minute of their life. How do I know that? Because the Torah bothers to record an entire conversation from a servant of Avraham Avinu. Yafeh sichatan shel avdei avot. How much more so the sichatan, the speech, the conversation of the avot themselves. So we could have had a whole Torah just relating conversations of Yitzchak and Rivka, of Abraham and Sarah, of every time Avram went to the grocery store. Everything would be a tremendous lesson. But the Torah cherry-picked the most important lessons. And you know what I see in that? Number one is understanding what are the red lines in your marriage. Number two, understanding that when your wife or your husband is in pain, Vaye'etar Yitzchak le'nochach ishto. Raise your hand here if you ever prayed for something in your life. Raise your hand. Think everybody. Everybody prayed for something. Did you ever pray with your wife for something? Interesting, huh? Maybe not so much. That's not as common. Pray for the same thing. And even if you did, where did you do it? You went to shul, she sat with Tehillim. What we're learning over here is something a little different. They're praying together in each other's presence. The Kutzke used to say that the reason why Yitzchak did that was so that he could see his wife crying while she was praying. So he could pray in a different way. There's an element here of togetherness, of being in a situation together, that I think is so beautiful. And I think the Torah is communicating that. And it's communicating that specifically, says the Kutzker, about a fellow like Yitzchak, who's so strong, who nothing can really get to him. So what does he do? He figures out a way to let something get to him, to break through. What a gorgeous idea. He's so givurah, so strong in his emunah, that he's capable of saying, if Hashem doesn't want us to have children, that must be the best thing for me. I could pray, but I'm not going to be so into it. Because, Kol ma David Rachmana letav Avid. Says the Kutzker, he prayed opposite his wife so that her tears would break that in him. Not that it would break his emunah. What he would say is, look, for me, I'm good. Ki akara, he's also akar. By Avraham Avinu, he could say ki akara he. She's akara, she can't have children. Because Avraham had kids. Where's Yitzchak's kids that you could say ki akara he? Right? It should say ki akurim hem. Akarim hem. The answer is that for Yitzchak, that was not the tefillah. The tefillah is he's looking at his wife and he's praying so much. And to me, I need you to understand this. Look at what Yitzchak is. That according to what the Kutzker is teaching us, he's capable of withstanding Something as big as not having children. But he's not capable of withstanding watching his wife cry. This level of connection, of empathy. Seeing, and how many times, never mind that we should be sensitive to it. How many times, men, are we the cause of it? Not that we meant to make them cry, or be upset, or be sad. Not that we did it on purpose, but we did it because we weren't careful. And by the way, not being careful is the same as doing it. How do I know that? I have a Mishnah that says so. Al shalosh averot nashin metot bishat liditan. On 3 sins do we find that women pass away during childbirth. What are the next words of the Mishnah? It should say on 3 averot. Nida, chalav, hadlakat haner. That's not what the Mishnah says. What does the Mishnah say? Al she'enan, right? Who remembers? We say it every Friday night. How does the Mishnah go? Al shalosh averot nashim metot shaditan. She'enan is zirot that they are not careful with. They're not careful with. Not being careful with something is the same as not doing it or doing it. So never mind praying with our wife, praying with our children, praying with our parents, with someone that you love, whoever it is, no matter what your status is, marital status. Being together in something, giving someone the feeling, I'm here with you 100% in what you're going through. I'm going through this with you. We just learned in Masechet Moed Katan a concept that a person rips when his wife is in Avelut. Why? To honor his wife. She's suffering, so I'm suffering. We suffer together. There's no such thing as suffering apart, as crying apart. As important as the lesson was to ensure that your wife has the values that will build your home, is important enough for the pasuk to teach us the power of being with the people you love when they cry. What a magnificent idea. Letting their sadness affect you to the point where you have no choice but to engage in fixing it. Never mind, God forbid, causing it. Never mind causing it. May Hashem bless us that when God sees how important our relationships are, when God sees how much we're praying for the person, not even, Yitzchak's not even praying for himself. Ki akara hi. And the pasuk says, and who does God listen to? Yitzchak. We know the Gemara tells us that when a person is praying for themselves, or a person is praying for someone else, and they need that thing too, who gets answered first? The other person. Who's Rivka praying for? Herself. Who's Yitzchak praying for according to what we learned? Rivka. But he needs the same thing that she needs. It doesn't mean that God listened only to Yitzchak. It means that the first one that God listened to was Yitzchak. Why? Because he wasn't praying for himself. He was praying because he felt what the other person was going through. What a beautiful thing it is to be able to do that. And unfortunately, sometimes we're praying, and we're praying for someone we mean well, but we're not in any way connected to what the person is going through, or to feel what it is. And I think, we say the tefillah of Refuah Shlema every day, to the point where you know all the names by heart. And we're saying the names off like this. And it's beautiful that they're in our mind, and we're saying it all the time. But sometimes I feel, maybe not praying for them every day, and being able to kind of call to mind what the person's going through would make our tefillot more powerful. Of course, the ideal scenario would be where we prayed for everybody, and we had the max level of empathy for them, of course. But maybe that's for the shoftim, asher einam bayamim ahem. Maybe that's for a bygone generation. At least we could try to do the max possible. Sometimes that's what we mean when we say that the Ramban writes that you're not mikayem the mitzvah of bikur cholim unless you pray when you go. Why do I have to pray when I'm there? The answer is because the minute you leave, it's not lenochach ishto. It's not lenochach that person. You're not seeing their pain and their suffering, and your prayer is already a different kind of prayer. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha Omer.